What do a salamander, a 19th century Massachusetts governor, and the practice of cartography all have in common? A lot more than you might think. You've probably heard the term gerrymandering before, right? For such a strange political buzzword, it actually impacts your life a lot more than you might expect. Well, let's start with the salamander in the room, redistricting. Every 10 years, there's a census. That decennial count is long and tedious and arduous and important because it confirms who lives where, so the federal government properly allocates resources, so services go to the places that need them most, and yes, so states gain or lose seats in Congress and have the opportunity to redraw all their state and congressional lines. That means every 10 years, states start what has famously been one of the most partisan and divisive processes in politics, because one strategic line can mean the difference in party control in not just the state legislatures, but also in all of Congress. So where does the salamander come in? Well, for that, we have to go back in time to 1812, during Massachusetts redistricting. The party in power at the time, the Democratic Republicans, wanted to make sure the districts they were drawing, well, favored them, which resulted in some funny-looking shapes, including this one. Does this resemble an amphibian to anyone? The Boston Globe certainly thought so, and blamed the state's governor at the time, Elbridge Gerry. See where I'm going? Thus the term gerrymandering, or gerrymandering as we say it now, of Governor Gerry approving a salamander-shaped district joined the English lexicon. And that's typically been the point of gerrymandering throughout history: partisan advantage. So you might be wondering, okay, this is interesting and all, but why should I care? Fair question, but remember, the laws that impact you most, the people who legislate in ways that change your daily life, they don't live in Washington, and they can draw themselves into power for decades. So they won't just draw this map, they'll draw maps well into the future. Just look at North Carolina. In 2008, Barack Obama narrowly won the southern swing state. As a result, and in retaliation, lawmakers drew their next map to change the balance of the congressional delegation from roughly evenly split to favoring Republicans 9-4. The map went from looking like this to looking like this. It is widely considered one of the most gerrymandered maps in modern history. It even split the campus of North Carolina A&T State University in half to dilute the student vote. By 2015, Republicans held 10 of the state's congressional seats. Democrats held 3. Or slide on up the East Coast to Massachusetts, the original home of gerrymandering. You'll see a similar trend, only it benefits the other party this time. In Massachusetts' 9 congressional seats, there is not a single Republican representative. This, even though the Commonwealth regularly elects Republicans statewide. So Democrats do it too, but it generally has less power. Smaller states equal fewer seats. But it's not just maps. You can even look to our recent elections. We don't have to go back that far to see how big of an impact gerrymandering can have. In the past few cycles, we've heard a lot about the upcoming election being the most important election of our lifetimes. But the most important election since the turn of the century wasn't 2016 or 2020 or 2018. It wasn't even 2008 or any other presidential year. It was 2010. Unfortunately, there's only so much we can do to fix the problem, and it's mostly our own fault. People tend to want to live near people who are like them. That means Democratic voters tend to flock to big cities with diverse and varied experiences and people. Republicans tend to live in more spread out rural areas and small towns. When lawmakers or commissions are drawing a map where every district is supposed to be compact and contain roughly the same number of people, not every district is going to have an even distribution of Democrats and Republicans. There are always going to be heavily Democratic seats and heavily Republican seats. But remember, parties in power are always looking to give themselves an advantage. So they might turn to packing or cracking. Basically, parties like to shove opposition voters into districts that dilute their vote by either packing all those voters into a limited space or spreading those voters across multiple districts. You can see this in Maryland's 6th congressional district, where a Democrat represents solidly ruby red Western Maryland because Democrats drew the district to include suburban Montgomery County, a liberal bastion right outside D.C. that's actually several hours from Western Maryland. Or here in Texas's 2nd district, which would almost certainly go to Democrats in the liberal and diverse city. if it didn't meander and contort its way into including just enough Republican voters and packing all those liberal voters into neighboring districts. It's probably happening in your state too, and while there isn't a ton you can do about it right now, you can help change the process. That's what some states have done, choosing to use an independent commission to draw boundaries rather than partisan maneuvering. So far, 7 states take this approach. Here's the deal. If you don't like the districts in your state, you do have one major power to exercise: your power to vote. You can vote in lawmakers who will draw fairer districts. You can tell those elected officials to adopt an independent commission. Because while gerrymandering is as American as apple pie, so is voting. Democracy works if you work it. So you want something to change? Do something about it.